Okay, who's here today? Matt? He's here. He's a different John Rockwell. Trying to make it in. Look at Matt. Who's here, Matt? Matt, yeah. Okay. Way down the front. When will that be up? This will be about Pam here or Sean? Okay.
You find out,
yeah, Matt's here. You gonna bring it up? Item number 4A. You give me a second. Yes. Time? So. everyone's quiet, it's probably a good time to start this meeting. I'd like to welcome everybody this morning. Got a good crowd. And you gentlemen, you're welcome to take your jackets off if you want to. I'd like to welcome Christina Martin, Vice Mayor of Columbia, sitting in today. Appreciate you being here. Thank you. Yeah. And I see Stan, you made it, didn't you, buddy? Representative Bill Haggard's office. He come to see me yesterday and he said, I'll see you at the meeting tomorrow. I said, okay. He said, yeah, I'll be there at the library. And I said, if you go there, you won't see me. So, I see you found it. Hey, it's the easy place to get to, and I'm sure we're just jumping around trying to do that. Hey, I'm gonna tell you, we'll be taking voice votes today. If you abstain or vote nay, you gotta identify yourselves for the record. I just have a call meeting to order the Transportation Policy Board, and we will be taking announcements. We'd like to make that it will be streaming today over the internet. Any guests that we have will be on the line if they're on. Okay, the first order of business, the minutes. Back, I'll take a motion to approve the minutes. Got a motion, need a second? Second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Minutes are filed. At this time, we'll take our public comments. Does anyone from the public would like to make a comment, please? You're more than welcome. Seeing none, we'll move on. Okay, we're going to our action items. And I'm going to introduce Sean. Everybody knows Sean, Transportation Planning Manager. Sean, let you take over.
Thank you, Mayor Vogel. I'll be subbing in for Anna Emerson today to go over proposed amendments for Amendment Cycle D. I know over the past couple amendment cycles, we've had a number of project changes. I think a couple of dozen projects in each of the past development or update cycles. And fortunately today, it's fairly small amendment cycle, just one project. Walk through this one, which is the addition of funds for the bridge replacement at Iron Bridge Road in Columbia. This project is being advanced by the City of Columbia, and they've pursued the initial phases of work, preliminary engineering, as well as the right-of-way with local funds, and will be moving through the right-of-way process and hoping to be let for construction in the fall of 2022. And so we'll be adding the construction funding, about $1.3 million in federal funds to the project, so that this project can move forward through the development process. Just a quick scope of the project: it will be a bridge replacement, two vehicle travel lanes, as well as a multi-use path on the north side of the road. Happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Sean? Okay, hearing none, I'll open this back up to the public for the purpose of receiving comments from the public. Anyone from the public like to speak? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing and ask for a motion to adopt this TIP amendment cycle D. Yes, ma'am. You make a motion or you look at comment? Okay.
I would like to make a motion that we adopt. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt resolution to amend the transportation improvement plan for this project.
Thank you, Ms. Martin. Need a second? Second. Got a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? I move that motion has passed. Thank you, Sean. All right, we'll move into our information items. At this time, I'm going to turn it back to Sean.
So we'll be staying on the TIP. This is next item is the update of the next TIP, which will span federal fiscal years 2023 through 2026. We've been in the process for the last half a year developing this TIP and spending a lot of time in reviewing the existing priorities, as well as updating information on schedules and cost estimates. And today we wanted to give you some additional components. We received proposed project priorities from the TDOT, Tennessee Department of Transportation, and so we'll go through and identify some some of those transportation investments that are identified over the next 4 years. We also didn't get a chance last time to go through the available transit funding that would span the next 4 years, and so we'll run through that as well as what those proposed investments look like as well. So starting off with just a quick reminder on the highway funding side. I know we went through kind of the financial outlook last time, but just a reminder, there's approximately $5 billion statewide on the highway side over the next 4 fiscal years, 2023 through 2026. That's largely the bump in available funding is largely due to the bipartisan infrastructure law or the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, and we were anticipating approximately $1.1 billion of that highway funding statewide to be coming to our region. The lion's share of that being funding from statewide pots that PDOT can use at their discretion to prioritize across the state. There's also a small portion of that funding within our region that is sub-allocated to National Area MPO to prioritize on investments. And so go through kind of the proposed TDOT investments from that statewide pot, that dark blue circle that you saw. And so the proposed TDOT investments over the next 4 years totals $534 million, which is less than that, approximately $1 billion number. We'll go into a couple of reasons for that. It breaks down by specific projects, so funding that has been identified for discrete individual projects, as well as, and that's about nearly 60% of that 534 in federal funds. And then the remaining portion falls within program groupings, and so program groupings for Surface Transportation Block Grant Program, the National Highway Performance Program, NHPP, as well as the Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP funding that you may be familiar with. And so looking at that on a breakdown within each fiscal year, you'll see that the specific projects are identified in federal fiscal years 2023, 2024, and 2025. There are none identified in 2026, and that is because the 2026 is the 4th year, which extends beyond the TDOT's 3-year work program, and so they don't identify projects in the TIP beyond the 3-year work program, or traditionally have not. Moving on to the next slide. So in looking at those specific projects, which equates to a little bit over $300 million in federal funds, less than 10% is dedicated to the NEPA and design phases of work. About 10% is allocated to right-of-way funding, and then the remaining of about 82% is dedicated to construction. And I think one noteworthy point is that there are a number of projects identified, but not all of those projects are fully funded within this TIP. And so in order to see the list of projects that TDOT has proposed through fruition, so all of those projects make it through construction, there would still need to be an additional $1.1 billion beyond this TIP for these projects to be completed. In our packet, we provided a list of those projects under consideration for the upcoming TIP. You can sort through that list. It's sorted by the lead agency, but we'll run through just a couple of highlights of projects with funding for construction, which a lot of these you have probably seen, as they are predominantly existing TIP projects in our current TIP, and the year in which the construction has been identified within the TIP or proposed in the TIP. And a couple of the new projects that haven't been in the existing TIP, they are consistent with our regional transportation plan, but they would be moving into the upcoming TIP. to receive construction funding. Next one, projects with funding for right-of-way. Some overlap with projects that have right-of-way and construction funding. There are also several projects that just have the right-of-way funding, and we're still awaiting the construction funding, which would come in a subsequent year or beyond the life of this TIP. We have requested from TDOT that anticipated construction year for projects that either don't have the construction funding identified or don't have been in previous TIPs but don't have any funding programmed within this TIP. And that's, largely so that, all of us have a stake in these projects and need to be aware of kind of those timelines and how they're changing. And so kind of knowing, or at least the latest information on when that project is likely to go to construction is useful in order to plan across local governments as well. Just highlight a couple of projects too that were in the current TIP but don't have funding identified in the upcoming TIP. Number of projects that you are likely familiar with. These projects are largely derived from the Improve Act and are earlier on in the phase of work. So a lot of these projects have not yet started, or they're still in NEPA or design. TDOT may be able to speak to some of the challenges. I know several of these projects have increased in cost between the last time we updated the TIP to now, which presents challenges. But there also might be scheduling issues where another project might be going forward to delaying these projects. So this is about $600 million in total project costs on these that you see on the slide.
Was TDOT going to explain that? Because some of those projects that I've seen in Williamson County, I thought we'd already started getting funding. They were kind of in that cycle that started to predict when they were going to go to construction. I'm a little confused. Particularly Southeast Mac. Actually, why did it for me? We were pretty encouraged that there's funding in place in that. These are projects that nobody else thinks are reaching. They're very what they're doing. And the question I would ask TDOT, if you hadn't got the money and the legislature's having to fund additional money to improve that, why are we still looking at this old model of pay as you go and not looking at using some leverage with the AAA rating that we have as a state? I'm not saying go crazy, but we're just getting further and further behind. So I'd love to just
I wish I could do that. This table was not in the, I don't think I can answer any of that right now. The issue is still the same. I'm writing this down.
I think whenever you're removing projects from community, there ought to be some communication to that community other than a big meeting with a whole bunch of people here. There should be some communication directly to that county, what's going on. This is very upsetting to me.
I can mention too that the Transportation Coordinating Committee, we were able to get Shane Hester from TDOT Region 3, who is they're pretty involved in the development of these priorities, and they indicated that funding was a large factor, that, as they're getting a lot of projects that are getting to construction, and those bids are coming in much higher than anticipated. There was also mention at that meeting that the regions are being tasked with identifying a 5-year capital plan, or drafting a 5-year capital plan that looks beyond the 3-year work program. I think it's largely for internal purposes, but we indicated that that would be useful information for our board members as well. And I think that is still in the process, but, hopefully we'll be able to get some of those, lists once they're developed.
But there are other projects that I don't see are removed that I don't necessarily consider of great regional importance. So I think we deserve some explanations, and I know inflation is eating us up right now, but we need to be exploring some ways so we can continue to build our infrastructure. We're just getting further and further behind.
I agree, and we tried to get Region 3 here, but I think there's, Shane was out at a conference this week, and
Let's see if we can get them here next time, please.
Thank you, Mayor.
Switching gears over to the program groupings, as I mentioned, NHTC, SCG, and the HSIP, largely allocates funding on the NHTC side to pavement and bridge condition on the interstate. SCDG, similar, but more so targeted towards the state routes. And then the HSIP funding allocating funding to improve safety at high crash locations. And so there are, these are program groupings, and so funding that's set aside for these purposes, but we don't know those specific projects that are identified right now, and they will be, kind of developed and updated over the coming years. But we have requested for TDOT as well as kind of better understand the universe, so asking for a list of those suitable candidates for each of these groupings, and just to be, better understanding and be aware of what it's likely to advance over the next 4 years. One thing that we did pull, TDOT recently put up on a ArcGIS online platform some of their pavement condition as well as bridge condition. And so if you go to the next slide, it's a little bit hard to see, but we'll share this link that you can go view, and you can see right now, this map just highlights the pavement across the region that's in poor or fair condition, the poor indicated in red and the fair in yellow. So that gives you at least a sense of where the needs are and where, funding can be targeted to address those needs. Similarly, on the bridge side, this map identifies bridges that are in poor or critical condition, actually. And so you can see kind of where those bridges are located across the region. And similarly, those are, bridges that are more in need and where funding is likely to be targeted. So that's our update on the TDOT investments, and we'll switch gears. I guess we can stop for any questions on the highway side before switching gears to the transit.
I can comment. Go back to what Mayor Moore was saying, and I think this is the state form, but I don't know if this is an appropriate time, but we have got a major project in the government's budget is funded. We just passed our budget. The match on the project is $18 million. We have committed in our budget $10 million for that match. City of Gallatin, possibly even Hendersonville, anything that breathes 6 touches. process, so we make sure that that gets in there, so we have at least access to some of that money, so these cities can leverage their match a little bit. I think that would be appropriate. So I'll make that formal motion, if that's appropriate.
Appropriate?
I know this one's a little bit, different in that, you know, we largely we're pointing towards existing, TIP projects as part of this cycle, but obviously, you know, the state came in with a lot of additional funding, and
That's right.
is it all state?
It's $111 million project that's basically funded. All we need is another $8 million. And of course, we've done our part on the local end as far as the county goes. PDOT will be receiving the money, yeah? And so I think it's about as ready as you can go.
I'm sorry, keep going, that's not even a city in the check. I guess I would like to understand what is the process of adding the project to the check.
Yeah, and I think, and I'm going to throw this back to Sean, but I think the issue is going to be on timing for that appropriate decision about that won't be made until August, September. So let me just throw that to Sean, just his rest of the schedule for this development. We are definitely waiting.
We have to wait for items in the check, and that's why I said, what is actually the process? Because there should be a process in which the city can put a new project or something forward as an amendment to the TIP that we would be able to all vote on and approve moving forward. And then even though there's money missing, that would then actually allow for us to start looking at ways to fund it. So I guess my question is, what is that process to allow us to amend the TIP so that we can add these projects that are really critical?
So I can speak to, we're in the process of developing the TIP, not amending the TIP, the existing TIP, but developing a new one, and it has to be fiscally constrained just like our existing TIP, and so I think the next step for this would be to flesh out the details on the project, identify the total project cost, the amount of state funding that's coming in, and then identify the remaining amount of local funds or federal funds that would be needed. And then we can provide that level of information, at the same level of information that we're providing all of these other priorities for your consideration.
We have a current TIP already set up, right? And you're in the process of updating it. I just want to make sure I'm understanding.
Yes.
However, there still should be a process that allows us to amend and add projects to the TIP. And it varies, and so forgive me, I've worked with many different NGOs, but that's why I'm asking, what is our process here to add and amend? Some people want to do it every quarter, some want to do it once a year. That doesn't work, I'll tell you that. So, again, what is that process to amend the TIP and add something? And yes, thank you, I'm glad you're updating the TIP because we have financial construction and different parts of it.
Well, Diane, it's a good question. We amend our TIP, there's an opportunity to amend the TIP of our meeting. We do it quarterly, we now do it every time we meet. There is a deadline for requesting amendments to the TIP. This morning, we started our action with amending the TIP to add funding for the Iron Bridge Road project. That's a project that had identified funding available from the construction reserve. I didn't have the requirements to get that money. We added the project. So we do periodically and routinely amend the current TIP. I think Sean's point is on the $600 million in surplus funds that the state included in the budget. There's just sufficient detail yet to add those projects to the TIP. Those are more likely going to be ready to go in conjunction with the adoption of the new TIP later this fall. But if PDOT were to provide that information sooner rather than later, and they we need to move forward on activity before the new TIP is in place, we would entertain an amendment. It's just that information is not available yet.
Mayor Moore. Well, there is a motion on the floor from Mayor Moore. Right. Second that motion.
Okay, I got a motion, second, any discussion?
And let me comment on that. There is no, I am not trying to disrespect our staff. They do a great job. But listen, I'm retired. I'm only here for 2 more months. And I just know that this body controls what goes on. And this is a project that is funded. And I think we would be remiss if we didn't have control of what goes on a little bit. We're making a suggestion. got to work together and be informed about what's going on. With that, I would appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am?
Thank you. Another question, that's how the process starts. Is it the state that has to put the request for the tip forward, or is the city able to do it with the funds identified by?
Sean?
They could come from, Sumner County or TDOT. I think, I guess what I'm thinking is, you know, if this request were to come in, we'd still have to come back to you with maybe a couple of scenarios of how to make the financial fiscal constraint element work, where there might be projects that would need to come out of the TIF or in order to make this.
So could we not put an amendment forward as well, there's much on the table, and I'm really excited to vote on it. But, and then that is going for another vote. Could you just show the gap, and then that would be good for consideration of how to, with the opportunities, additional dollars that might come in through IAA project or whatever, that should be able to tap in $8 million to be able to get the project forward. Could we actually do it in this step? So that it shows the financial constraints, but we're not moving everything else around.
I would think the motion was made, there's a second, maybe the motion should include the amount. You got that, Mayor Hope?
I do.
Okay.
And I think the state does, Matt will have that. I think it's $111 million
Yeah.
in, change.
Okay, now earlier,
You may have that exactly.
right,
I just want to make sure that what I'm hearing is that you want to amend, you made a motion to amend.
Yeah, to include that project in, because really,
Which TIF, though, the current TIF, the dot.
yes, that would be fine, either one. I just want to make sure it's baked in, because I'm not going to be here, and I'm the kind of guy that will speak up. A lot of times, we sit here, we don't speak up about our project, and that's okay. I'm good with that. But I'm not shy, and I like to speak up, and I like to advocate for all the regions. And Mayor Moore had a good point. I mean, we've got to do a better job informing ourselves. I'm not going to direct that at anyone. And I want to make sure this thing is funded. I want to make sure that federal funds are available to leverage what my cities need to come up with as far as a match. Because the state has been very generous to us and very generous as a region, and we want to make sure that we do our part. Because that's how you get these projects done. We all know that. You put some skin in the game, they get done. If you sit on projects and you're not willing to pony up some money, they go on, and then they end up, Matt, where the project comes on board. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yes, it does. But, you know, we also have to understand the following procedure.
Yes.
We have the process of comments, still stays physically constrained.
Well, I think we could still go through all that process. I think this gives our team, I want to say, some direction on what direction we need to go in. Like I said, I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to advocate for what I'm doing.
Our staff is amenable to any of this. We just need to have the information presented to us. This is a state-led project, so the state has the financials on the project, the scope of work of the project, and then with the RTP, which is paid by 100% together. Then we can bring it back before you for a proposed amendment that will then be released for public review and comment, and then adopted as a substitute meeting. So I think that is a big technical process. So
It goes through, I'm not trying to circumvent it.
so the motion would be, to direct staff to work with the state to prepare an amendment.
I like the way you word it.
that's way, I like that too. Plus, we're letting the public have a chance. Pam, I think you want to say something?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, so I was texting with Sean and trying to understand. So for us, if you want to, this is your process. If you want to change your process, however you want to go about it, it's your process to change. So, but talking with Sean, if you want to follow what Michael just said, then feel free to do that. But if you believe we're okay with that.
We still require public review and comment, and for it to be noted.
Like I said, this is your process, so however you want to do this, it's up to you, but if you want to, I mean, you have two choices, I understand, what Mayor Holt is offering and what Michael just said a minute ago, but it's your choice how you want to see today.
So do we need to make a friendly amendment to the mayor's, motion, based on what Michael said, so that we are putting the right thing on the table, which is basically that, motion be adjusted to ask staff or the state put together the, amendment coming before the board to the tip as a project.
I'm fine with that.
What did she say? I couldn't hear.
She's saying, to amend the motion with Michael's suggestion, work with the state and go through the process where we have public comment.
Okay.
I'm good with that.
What we're doing is putting this on the table. And I'm not tabling it, I'm putting it on the table for where we can get this ball rolling.
Don't table it.
No, I'm not tabling it. I think you're gonna get this ball rolling. Mayor, you got a comment?
So, all of us as leaders here, we try to work off of good public policy. It's great that Ken brought this up about the 3 projects coming off, and the way we find out about it is through a GCC meeting. There are people come back and tell us, and that's not the proper way to do that. I think some of the root causes of our issues here that every year we lose a project to someplace that's, it all focuses around money. So we just got notified by documents. I know there are other figures here that got cut also. And everybody's jockeying for this extra money that was put in the legislature. We want to be sure we get our share. I appreciate Andy making the comment he did, but, I would be more in favor, not that I'm against Sumner County, but let's don't short circuit ourselves. That we need to have discussion about whether it's the procedures you're talking about. Now, I can make an argument that Anthony was out of line on his motion for parliamentary procedure. I won't do that, but you can't speak to something and make a motion on it without further. The parliamentary procedure would allow that he could not do that.
Okay.
However, I've said all that, I'm all for Sumner, Henderson, all of them getting it. I want everything from Williams County. I'm sure Davidson County, she's over there, she's come to the table, she's got something in mind, and so does everyone here has got something in mind. I'm an open ag boy. Don't just take the whole crop out, because we got a few things not performing here.
Yeah.
You understand that?
Let me,
So, Mama, if you want a motion before we vote on this, let's have a discussion, let's get it right. This body should be telling what we want. I'm afraid we kind of got away from that sometimes.
I think,
But it's not fair to man to sit here and have to defend something he didn't know about, Mayor.
I think that Anthony, Mayor Hope, wants this ball to start turning and these wheels rolling.
He's got
But
one more meeting.
I don't think, but I don't think, we just did a tip amendment a minute ago, and I asked anybody from the public here to speak. So if we do something different and the public's not offered to speak on this, we're probably not doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Well, I think that's good public policy, is what I'm saying here.
But,
If you've got the power to get this done, all for Anthony.
but I think I'm willing to maybe take a motion, if Michael and that this be brought up at the next meeting with the public able to speak. Am I wrong here?
I think you're right, Mayor, and let me say this on the part of mine. I think Rogers is correct. I'm not trying to take away from any. We have got to do a better job collectively. He's right, I'm a Quacker, I'm a linked up. But thing is, got to do a better job of us as a body participating and staying more involved
I agree.
in our staff. I mean, and they're not gonna know, I mean, it's not their fault if we don't communicate, well with them and give them direction. I mean, whose fault is that? It's really ours. And so, I mean, we've got some available funding out there. I really think for us to be effective, we've got to prioritize in what has been funded, what hasn't been funded. And if you want to get it funded, we've got to do a better job to make sure we prioritize those issues, get them funded so we can move forward. Having things sit there for decades and not moving forward is to none of our advantages. And in fact, what's happened with TDOT, yes, there's not enough money to go around, but if we have money that's obligated sitting there, the project never moves forward. It is eliminating vital projects that we need regionally. And so, yes, I apologize if I seem like I'm trying to take anything away from anybody. That's not, it's my job to try to advocate for something. Thank you.
Thank you. I would also like to add to that, I don't disagree with what you're saying, but I do think there's times that TDOT does not provide to our staff some of the numbers that we need to be able to bring to this board some of the items that we need to be able to make some of those decisions.
Okay.
And I think that, I would hope in the future that TDOT can bring us more information that we need to be able to provide information.
And this is coming from Chairman of the Task Force. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, just to connect this conversation with the last meeting. The last meeting, we did a deep dive into the projects that were submitted for consideration for the new TIF by local government. We said at that time that we didn't yet have information from TDOT about the projects that they were going to take forward, there were a couple of questions that we need to ask at TDOT. What itemized projects are you wanting the region to for spring inclusive TIF? And what candidates are you looking at with respect to programmatic investment? We got some of the answers to those questions, and that's what we're sharing with the body this morning. That's what you're reacting to. It's not information from our staff. It's some of the questions that were answered by TDOT in our last meeting. This is not a conversation that's out of order. It's the normal course of doing a new TIF that we would have included the $600 million that went in our region into the new TIF. The question becomes, with this body like to move forward, to include this project, which is a subset of the $600 million in surplus, in the existing TIF, if we get to adopt a new TIF. Our staff is amenable to that, but we have to have a project on the table to make sure that there's a scope of work, a budget that's fiscally constrained, identified revenue, and that we've got to take it through a public participation process. It should all be done within the parameters of the modified version of American.
Okay. This is good stuff here. Go ahead, Mayor.
I can follow up with one other thing Ken said, but you do have motion on the board. I do think it's time that all of us understand what other states and other MPOs are doing. Because I think a lot of TDOT and MPO, I think all of us are very discouraged by the amount of new roads, bridges that we're able to get. Eddie Hood is the only highway 31 years. It won't be United States this one in 31 years. Well, maybe some.
Well, you know, I think, I don't have the mic, so I'll keep it short, but, done several investigations of creative funding and financing opportunities. Sean can speak to some of that. We'll bring that back at an upcoming meeting and dive into that a little bit deeper. But I think, you know, the efforts of the mayor in terms of the Improve Act was tangential to those efforts to identify new funding, but obviously Improve Act wasn't sufficient enough to cover all of your needs. So, we're 100% in agreement with you that we can't continue to live with the resources that we provide ourselves at this point and expect to get anything measurable done for our community.
Okay, I think we got a motion and a second on the floor, and I would like Mayor Hope to redo his motion, so I can understand what he's saying.
Well, I think if I'm going to restate the motion, I want to add this project.
Okay, that's how I thought.
But I want to do it in the proper, proper form, and I think that what.
I love to hear the word
What
public
that's
hearing.
going to do is get with TDOT, get the numbers, make sure we're all in line, have public comment, do it the right way. Is that correct, Michael? That's a good way to say it. And so, as long as my honorable friend, Mayor Rogers Anderson didn't call my motion out of order, that's how my motion is. Did you get that?
Not really, that sounded pretty abbreviated to me. Mayor Anderson, you happy with that?
Chairman, I'd go along with anything, but I'm not voting for it. Not voting for it. Funding, I'm voting for it to come back.
Okay, that's what I'm voting on, I hope that's what the motion's about. All right, I've got a motion and a second, any more discussion? All in favor?
Motion is to bring it back.
Bring it back and go through the proper procedures with public and, we're aware of the situation. And, I'm sure Mayor Hope will be here next month.
Is it to bring it back as an
Amendment
amendment to the TIP?
to the tip for the amount of money that I have not on top of my head.
Wait a minute, that's a little different. So I'm gonna have to call him, ask Robert's rules of order. He cannot speak to a motion, speak to an item, and then make a motion. Improper motion.
Never had this happen to me in my court, 24 years.
Well, if there's a reprieve I can offer, staff doesn't typically need motions at a meeting to bring forth a proposed amendment. If TDOT is ready to move forward with the amendment, which I think will be encouraged to do so by Thunder County, we will bring it to the body to entertain. I mean, it's just normal course. But maybe withdrawal and just trust that the staff will work with TDOT to prepare.
Mayor Hope, the next meeting, your last meeting. I promise you.
When we gonna have our next meeting?
I promise you that if this is not prepared for you to be voted on,
Yes.
staff's word, and, well, I can't say nothing, I'm up for re-election too. Somebody, I trust somebody on this board will bring up your emotion, and let's see that you can get help in your cities.
Hey, what's up?
Let me understand, Mr. Chairman, I don't have a problem.
Oh, okay.
If, my colleague,
Oh, no.
says that I'm out of order,
Well, there's still kind of,
but
I
let me
have
say
a deal.
this.
I can hear Michael now, and that's about it.
Anyway, sorry about that. I guess the intent is, our next meeting, Sean, is
Wait a minute, I can tell you this.
August 17th.
August 17th, I'm good. And so, my understanding that staff has made a commitment to DDOT, get the numbers, and to bring it back and have a public hearing.
Is that right?
Feel like I'm in the twilight on that.
Okay. Okay, Mayor Hope.
ghost of Christmas past. Are we, and I guess I'm speaking to Sean and some degree, DDOT, are we in agreement with that? That what you understand?
That's what I understand.
Yeah, I think, the one piece of information, and we could probably do both of these scenarios, but including it into the current tip is gonna be tougher on the fiscal constraint, given that we have more money available in the next 4 years. So we could, you know, propose, both scenarios if the board was interested in that.
So that's what you're gonna do, propose both scenarios. I'm just trying to.
The answer to the question.
We'll do it for,
The answer to
legal motion.
The answer to the question is yes, we're to prepare, an amendment for the next meeting to be considered. Now,
Okay.
there will be analysis of that amendment, whether it's physically constraining, conforming to all the rules, but we'll prepare the amendment, as for by you, but we'll have to rely on TDOT for it.
Okay. Well, Roger, I'll withdraw.
Okay, I gotta withdraw. There's the Manning today on what? I'm staying out of it. Mayor Moore, you can withdraw your second. Okay, thank you.
Pointed out, deficiency of Mayor Holden. I didn't say it.
No.
Okay, hey, I got a, good,
Got a question.
okay.
My question is pertaining to the 23-26. Sean, would you just briefly talk about what qualifies a project to be included in the CIP? Here's my understanding, and I confirmation. Mentioned the project has to be fiscally constrained, so they got to have a funding source and commitment of that funding. My question is really rooted in if the town eligible is willing to move a project forward, widening of Owens River, and we're willing to front the cost of the engineering studies, the need for the right-of-way purchase in order to do that. We don't necessarily have a contract with TDOT yet, for the construction side, but we're willing to take care of the power dime, to do the front end. Is that project eligible? If because there's a funding source for those components, does it have to be funded for the construction side or funding on the construction side?
We've, I think a good example of this are, the, RTP, RTP amendments that we made earlier this year, for, a number of projects in Mount Juliet as well as Metro that had, local funds to start the project. Although, you know, as things change or, federal funding opportunities arise, that they may be able to leverage those as the project proceeds to construction. And so we can add those, we into the RTP, which is where we derive our TIP priorities from. And then, you know, if those projects are then amended into the RTP and then have phases of work that are proceeding over, you know, in the current fiscal year or the next fiscal year, then we can add those into the TIP.
I do want to emphasize that in your scenario, if the project is included in the RTP is fully funded within the fiscal constraints, we could easily move it into the TIP with local funding in the short term. But there is also, fiscal constraint is one qualification. Inclusion in the regional transportation plan, fiscally constrained, plan is also another qualification, and that will have to account for where the ultimate build out of that project is coming from.
Pam?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I just want to make sure the TIP document is not a checkbook.
Okay. Anyone else? If not, Sean, you remember where you at?
Here's our, placeholder. We're gonna switch over to transit funding, and, Daniel's gonna walk you through these slides.
All right, I'll go through this as quickly as I can. So this is a chart of the federal transit apportionment statewide between 2010 and 2026. You'll see a similar trend with the transit funding and the highway funding. The bipartisan infrastructure laws, about a 30% increase in transit funding available throughout the state. About $520 million statewide, about $130 million annually throughout the life of the TIP. And then this is just a projection of transit revenue for fiscal years 2023 to 2026. That carryover you see on the far left, that represents multiple years of funding for the transit funding that would be in place. And then as the fiscal years 2023 to 2026, about $40 million per year. And then this is just a breakdown of different funding sources that we have available in our region, carried over, but will be programmed in TIP as well as, or what's available in TIP. And then you'll see that there's a difference between the national DOT-ETA and emergency ETA with those sub-allocated funds. And then there's FDA 10, 37, what makes up transit revenue for our region. Now I'm going to go through transit investments. Just like with all of our local governments, we met with all of our transit agencies as well to figure out what they were requesting for funding. So this is just a summary of what the transit agencies have requested to be programmed in the TIP. And then this is priorities by purpose. So as you'll see, the majority of those projects are capital projects, about 80%, followed by about 14% for operations. Tiny amount, a little less than 1% for planning purposes. And then this is a breakdown of transit capital projects by type. You'll see 46% for maintenance, 29% for facilities, so bus facilities, new transportation, and then 60% for new vehicles, rehab, and then about 9% for equipment. So that's all I've got. If anybody has any questions, I can answer them, or any of the transit purposes.
Any questions? All right, I'll give it back to Sean.
The last, item that I wanted to just give a brief, recap on is, the sub-allocated highway funds, that, orange piece of the pie that is, sub-allocated to the MPO region for prioritization. And, I think we went through a number of these, we went through, the slide to indicate how much carryover funding is available, which is about, $195 million, that we will be working with that move over into the next TIP. And then in addition to the carryover funding, we have the new revenue that would be sub-allocated to our region, which is approximately $30 million a year. So between those two, we've got about $320 million available to program the project. And then the next slide will indicate, based on that available funding and comparing it to the summary of requests thus far, we've got, in the gray bar, we've got projects that are in the existing TIP that haven't moved forward to completion, so they would be carried over into the next TIP. That makes up the majority of the funding. In addition, there's funding set aside for our transit technology program for a future call for projects, as well as our active transportation program. And then the last piece of that bar chart that you see is in orange, which is additional funding requests for those projects that are carrying over. So either projects that are progressing through the project development phase and have updated cost estimates, that are higher, or, even just a fresh update as we took a look at this tip cycle of projects that, maybe have not moved through the process, but, need an updated estimate, in terms of how much it would cost to accomplish those projects. So, even with those sub-allocated requests, there's still a portion of funding that is available. We've been hesitant to commit this to any, projects, given that there has been a lot of uncertainty with projects as they come in, proceed to construction. There's been a number of cost increases that, we are, working our best with communities to address, but that continues to be an ongoing challenge, in the near term. And so kind of projecting out what those inflationary pressures would be and how to build it into the tip to, ensure that we don't have problems and, insufficient funding down the road. Also, through the work with the Project Delivery Task Force, taking a harder look at projects that have not yet started. We know that project cost estimates tend to become more accurate and higher as they proceed through the development process, and so, taking a look at projects that haven't started the NEPA process to, identify if there's additional planning that should be done in order to, troubleshoot any or mitigate the, number of challenges that they face, going through the process. And then obviously, local match commitments and, being able to, have that sufficient funding to match, additional cost increases, that carryover projects are experiencing. And I think another key question that came up today is, now that we know, some of the TDOT priorities that they've, identified, is there opportunities to leverage or utilize the sub-allocated funding to, complement those projects or, support those, some of those projects that maybe didn't make the list. And so those are all, things that we continue to need to grapple with before we develop a fiscally constrained tip. Any, questions on the sub-allocated?
So, this is a question under utilities. If utilities are in a road right of way, is TDOT calculating that in your, bullet point one? You are?
We are, that's part of the development cost.
So when a utility company is in a right of way of the county, that's the utility's responsibility to do it. It's in the utility. So why are we paying a third-party source to do that? And I know it's for expedience. County mayor, Governor County spoke to that.
I'm not inclined to say no, but that's not true.
Do what?
So in my experience of putting costs together, all the utilities costs were part of the design. As far as your question about whether or not it's right away, I don't know exactly how they do that. The design is process.
So Michael, or Sean, what's your concept of utilities being in right of way? What's your, cities, counties have to pay for that? TDOT pay for that, or the utility? What's state law say?
I don't know the specifics. Someone, might have more information, but I believe that, there's a difference between like the 50% or 100%. And Andy might be the most knowledgeable, given the number of projects he's taken through local programs. We do have, some TDOT local program staff that might have experience too with the right-of-way requirements.
The city of Murfreesboro, utilities in the right of way, they're down. They're outside the right of way,
Okay. Sean, you done on that topic? All right, anybody got any more questions for Sean? I think we're, okay.
I just have a follow-up question, at the last board meeting as well as in the last board meeting we had, there was roughly $3 million that we looked at allocating. Can y'all give us an update on those, if we had identified projects allocated, but we did not use that $3 million?
Yeah, I was gonna address that on the staff report, but we can do that now. So there's two, sources. One is the Highway Infrastructure Program, which is, there's about 3.7 subject to lapse. We've been trying to work with TDOT to identify a project that we could swap that funding with, to allow us more flexibility to utilize that money, in subsequent fiscal years. We didn't identify any very promising candidates within projects that are within our TIP through our sub-allocated product funding that are eligible for that funding source, and that could just be moving forward, like the funding could be added to that project that's in an existing phase or will be entering construction in the next couple of months. In terms of the Transportation Alternatives Program, the TAP funds, we do have a solid candidate for that. The City of Hendersonville has a Sanders Creek Ferry bike trail that had a additional cost increase. The bids came back higher for construction than they anticipated, so that I believe it's about $1.2 million in federal funds to be allocated to that project to utilize that funding subject to that. And we can process that through adjustments just to speed up the process.
Okay, anyone else? Speak up just a little bit.
If it is.
There you go.
I apologize. When I say the legal, there's something. If the project has, utilities to be located in public right of way, those are on the utility company, side, and we to relocate those, their lines, their sewer, whatever they do, be on their side. To private right of way, that would be project cost. So there's no private right of way, Chapter 86, as a rule, we usually apply to programs projects, and then maybe just an exception, the commissioner itself doesn't make sense. Chapter 86 applies to our programs project. I think that maybe also utility bonds, you can see, it's been on a lot of areas projects, especially ICS, utility main and some other utility type work that is done, not traditional relocation, but it could be additional costs that would be involved in the utility section, or negotiating with these utility companies. Either use their poles or their fiber or something in that regard, that can increase costs. So I just want to clarify on some of the regional programs, utility costs, I guess, play those best. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Not, we'll move on to Sean again for Unified Transportation Planning Program.
Thank you. So the next item is an update on our annual call for studies for the Unified Planning Work Program. Our current work program takes us through federal fiscal years 2023, and largely this process of going through the update is really focused predominantly on coordinating a lot of the planning across that is occurring across the region. We have a number of regional studies that we are looking to kick off, that we're working on and looking to kick off in the near future. You've heard of the Regional Growth Management Study, as well as Coordinated Human Services Transportation Plan update. And there's a lot of activities going on at the local level that are wrapping up or that are going to kick off in the near future that complement a lot of those efforts. And I think this is where there's an opportunity to have discussions on as we kind of flesh out those work scopes where there might be opportunities to align your efforts with ours to achieve the regional goals and objectives as well as your local goals and objectives. So, we have a survey out there that we're hoping, will continue to leave us so that we get, additional participation. I think, one thing that we've, noticed in the survey responses that have come back so far is that the rise in serious injuries and fatalities as a, priority is elevated to the top of the list and, continues to be on, a higher priority for you all, given the rise in fatalities and serious injuries across the region, continued rise over the years. I think, worsening traffic congestion continues to be up there as well, and then, the affordability and housing choice, I think, definitely moves up the list, and it'll be interesting to see the results as more people take the survey, but, with the change in housing prices, I think that it's not a surprise that this one is getting additional attention and higher priority. Also, the limited funding and financing options continues to be an issue for our region, particularly as coming up with local revenue sources to address and pay for some of the infrastructure to mitigate this growth and development. So, just wanted to give folks an update on some of the activities that are underway by members across the region. You may or may not be familiar with some of these, but a lot of work in the active transportation planning realm. Sumner County is wrapping up their active transportation plan. Metro's done a number of studies for the walk and bike master plan update, as well as Vision Zero action plan, and then their implementation plan that's underway. And then also Murfreesboro Transit, focusing on transit shelter planning. For some of the sub-area studies, we've got the Connect Downtown effort that's underway to solve a lot of those congestion problems and safety issues that you may or may not experience, not only getting to downtown, but then traveling within downtown Nashville. And then Franklin has the Goose Creek Connector study to identify vision for growth and development in that corridor. And then looking into some of the upcoming activities, WeGo has a number of efforts underway, not only updating their origin destination study and an N-motion update, but also BRT planning. We've got a number of activities at the local level, not only focused on kind of the traffic, whether it be parking or impact fees and the revenue options to support that growth and development, but also we've got, I think, a number of communities focusing on whether it be the traffic impact study guidelines or the requirements that they're asking of developers, I think, which really complements the regional growth management study well, to, identify where there's opportunities for some consistency across the region, so that, each community is not going at it alone. And then a number of the recently awarded urban transportation planning grants from TDOT's process to Nolensville, Thompson Station. I think the TMA group was also awarded, and Westmoreland for a corridor mobility plan as well. So a lot of work underway and coming up in the coming year. We also received 2 funding requests that I think, given that we have a limited amount of planning dollars for MPO staff as well as some of these regional initiatives, that some of the funding requests that we got, one from Metro National for multimodal mobility master plan, and also from Sumner County for the future phases of the net corridor planning. That these types of efforts, I think, are better suited, and there's more opportunity to leverage SDG funds for planning activities through the TIP development process, given the size and scope and the more local or sub-regional nature of some of these efforts. And just a quick summary of the schedule. So we're looking to process this UPWP amendment in August, and so please continue to take the survey, get us your updates. We'll also be following up with staff and elected officials to make sure we have up-to-date information and discuss any of the requests or comments that you've submitted, and then we can process that in August. Happy to take
Any questions, Sean? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to item C, the Hytch Rewards presentation. Sean, I think you want to introduce a couple people.
So given that we're getting short on time, we will defer the majority of the Hytch presentation to our next meeting, but did want to introduce Mark Cleveland and Robert Hartline from Hytch. We just say it's been kind of a long time coming, but we worked to identify funding for Hytch through our Transit and Technology Grant back in 2019, and we're excited to have made it through the process to get ready to launch the Hytch platform within our region to really use this tool to achieve a lot of the goals and objectives identified in the Regional Transportation Plan, from easing congestion to improving economic mobility and access to jobs within the region. And doing that through this platform that offers incentives to guide behavior and travel behavior within the region. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mark and Robert to introduce themselves.
My name is Mark Cleveland. I know most of you already. It's been a long journey for all of us that we're trying to sort of create how to be more efficient with the assets we have, how to create more assets for our community, and to be more mobile. I want to recognize that there's the city of Franklin, the city of Brentwood, Spring Hill, some of our local accounts have been experimenting and working with us through these last number of years. We're going to truncate this intentionally. We can get out. I want to introduce my business partner, Robert Hartline, co-founder at Hytch Rewards. We've been at this for 6 years. This gentleman, some of you may know him as the CEO and founder of Absolute Wireless. He had 56 Sprint T-Mobile retail stores throughout the Southeast. Some of you know this both from how to work with people, work with them in the mobile world, how to integrate that with our technology and motivate people with Robert. So I'm going to just hand the microphone over to Robert. Just pretty unusual. Thank you, Mark, and thank you for your dedication to what our mission is. You know, I had toured about 90% of the areas that you guys serve. I know firsthand how hard it is to keep and find great people to come to work. When the distance to get to work is long, it makes it even harder to convince someone to do something. Incentives work. They work today because everybody's here. It also works on the road. We proved that in 2019. With your help and your support, we are going to need your help to get people, get on webinars with us, so we can talk about how the tool of Hytch not only going to incentivize the people to come to work and use a particular way to get to work, whether it's a carpool, public transit, but most important, teach employers how to use the tool to recruit and find great people. When you use the tool that we have at our disposal, we're going to allow companies to mentorship to work. The new hire process is broken. I saw it firsthand in my store. People start to work and may not have a great experience, and guess what? They leave. All that time and energy to train that new hire is out the window. But when you have an employee that's been with you for a number of years and they take that new hire to work, you build bonds that solidify that relationship at that workplace. And the people need bonds. Keep talking about the Great Reset. The reason the Great Reset exists is we sent them all home to work. They lost the bonds. They lost those bonds. You want to build those bonds back, you do it by mentorship, work program. Not only is it going to creating a way for employers to keep great people. That person that gets the right to work from Murfreesboro saves $412 a month. It works. We have to have the right people. We have them in this room today. We have employers. We have the community. We have this opportunity today for you to actually see the work done in your lifetime. With this project happening. Thank you again for your support, and I'm super excited to see what we can do now. So Robert just described one reason companies are engaging with us. And I'll tell you the obvious. Cost of fuel is so high that the primary reason people are doing business with us today is they're trying to help offset fast and fair, reasonably and automatic offset the cost of fuel because of fuel. Maybe the second reason would be they have better relationships and emotion. Maybe the third reason is that we help them create our frontier and our service. Maybe the fourth reason is we can help get people on active mass transit. We don't have enough time to answer all your questions today. We're not trying to. We're just trying to introduce ourselves. We've been working at this for 6 years. We have customers in San Diego like Intuit, QuickBooks. We have customers in South Bend, Indiana that are paying people 50 cents a mile, paying individuals on tiny, low transportation, low reliable transportation. I don't have cars, groups, people who can't get to work for all the reasons that we know. Put them in a group and then pay somebody 50 cents a mile to pay the place where they get regular services. So this is a new way to look at how to incentivize mobility. We're super proud to be a part of Nashville. Robert, myself, MERS, and friends of yours as leaders who want to make this work with you. We have a structure and process and program to do it. And a public-private partnership that makes a lot of sense. We're looking forward to framing how that works, how we deliver instant value. We're just here to tell you the employers are reaching out to you, you know it, and Gallup, and I'm hearing it all the time. I'm spending most of my time actually in the Gallup area with employers that have reached the limit and they're trying to do something creative and new. I believe you will have an employer community that will engage in this public-private partnership. I have to believe it, and investing 6 years of my energy and my time. I hope you all this is supported. By the way, we're all thankful for working from home. There's a lot of wonderful things that happen working from home. But I met with President Elliott this week. He showed me the statistics that they got this back. We all know it. It's not very close. Just a small jump from calculated like we can do better. That's what we're doing.
Okay.
Thank you. And so I think, as Mark mentioned, we're working towards the next steps to deploy this platform, which, allows us opportunities to use the Hytch app to either get someone who's commuting into downtown Nashville onto another mode, or to commute with carpool with a coworker. There's also, a lot of different opportunities to structure the tools to encourage certain behaviors. And so if a certain corridor is congested or under construction, there's the ability to incentivize people to use other corridors, or even certain time periods with, the peak morning or peak period, peak PM commutes to incentivize people to avoid traveling during those systems, during those times when our system is stressed. So I think that we're excited to work with a task force that is specifically involved in identifying those opportunities to connect these goals and objectives that we've identified through the Regional Transportation Plan into rules that we can then use to incentivize people's behaviors that align with those goals and objectives. And so we'll continue to be involved, and you'll hear more about that as we bring that group together to help us in crafting what those rules look like to deploy the platform.
Okay, thanks, Sean. Any questions or comments for Sean? If Now, we'll move on to our reports. The federal report ready. Sean, are you here? Okay, take off, Sean.
All right, so yeah, transport where I had to step away, apologies for that, I'm Sean Shania, I'm a planner with our FHWA division. So just a couple of items to note from the Federal Highway Administration, we have a couple of funding opportunities that are open that I make everyone aware of. Hopefully, the first one is not new, the Safe Streets and Roads for All program. Is a discretionary program funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law to fund regional, local, and tribal initiatives to prevent roadway deaths and serious injury. So this is $1 billion available in FY '22 for local government and MPOs. States are not eligible applicants for this discretionary grant opportunity. And this is really the federal government's way of being able to address local and regional safety concerns and to demonstrate implementation of our safe system approach. We're looking for more innovative, not just infrastructure-based methods for advancing safety or addressing safety concerns. How do we address behavioral issues, enforcement, emergency response, the full gamut of influencing factors for safety. So again, this funding opportunity is open to local government and will close on September 15th. We've got some webinars on our website. And then the last one is our Bridge Investment Program. This funding opportunity just opened up and is $2.36 billion for FY '22 to fund projects to replace, rehabilitate, preserve, or protect bridges that are on the National Bridge Inventory. So we're funding planning for bridge projects, large bridge projects over $100 million in cost at a 50% federal share, and then smaller bridge projects below that cost threshold at an 80/20 share. So those we've got different closing dates for that funding opportunity. Planning grants have to be submitted by July 5th. Any large bridge project applications have to be submitted by August 9th. And smaller bridge project funding applications have to be submitted by September 8th. So I believe we sent that notice out to the MPO staff. We'll ask if you guys don't mind to share that, Sean. Otherwise, that's all we've got.
Okay, any questions for Sean?
Is there money for any service or all of the services?
So there's money for new bridges, yeah. There's an opportunity.
I did have one question, probably more for you on that, obviously, we have to prove that, bridges on there, I would assume there are structures already on this.
Okay, anyone else? If not, we'll move to our TDOT report. Matt?
Okay, in the interest of time, I will report on one of our bigger ticket items, the Tennessee Electric Vehicle Infrastructure Deployment Plan. We are in the home stretch right now, a 6-month sprint. Our plan is due to the Joint Office of Transportation and Energy on August 1st. We're looking to have a final draft done sometime beginning of July, so we can get it out to our senior staff and also put it on our website. If anybody has signed up for our mailing list, you can see a copy of that advance your comments. We've talked about it in the past, we've been out about across the state, we went to 9 different meetings, we had over 1,000 survey responses for this plan, so we're pretty excited. This plan helps us unlock $88 million in funds that will go towards charging stations across the state. So, again, if you haven't checked our website yet, n.gov/plan. A lot of information.
Okay, any questions for Matt? Any comments? Thank you, Matt. Now we'll move on to the chair's report, really because of time. I think everybody's seen today how important it is for all of you to be here. We've learned a lot, and, knowledge is not you don't have much of it, it's a dangerous thing. But I'm concerned, I wake up, I think better at 2 o'clock in the morning. But I think, this is bothering me about the fuel situation and what it's costing TDOT to do these projects. And with the diesel, I know in my county, we had so many miles we was gonna do this year in paving, we've already had to cut it 40%, which that just moves it down the road. That's what's gonna happen to your projects too. That's how important Mayor Reed's task force is, to keep us informed about what's going on with TDOT and the money. And your attendance here is very, very, very important. I'm gonna, at that, I'm gonna let Sean do the staff report.
I don't have much, but I will just encourage you, there was a lot of discussion on the tip items today. We do have a, resource, I think that the tip tracker, GNRC tip tracker that was included in the packet, for detailed information on each of those projects that are identified, whether it's transit agencies, local governments, or TDOT. That is available, and that is really what we've been using to develop the tip. And so, if you're looking for information on total cost, whether there's funding about a project, or committed to a project in the next 4 years, that's where you can find it. And we'll be continuing to update that through the development of this tip. A lot of the items that we showcased is it's kind of a summary of all of those projects that you'll see individually identified.
Okay.
Mayor Goldstein, you mentioned the project delivery test. Have you guys scheduled another meeting for that project yet?
Not yet.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Anybody else? Call the time. Thank everybody again. Any business to bring up, additional business before we get adjourned? Seeing none, I'll take another motion.
Mayor, I'm hoping to make that motion.
I gotta get something passed today.
You pass the cars going home. All right, we're adjourned.
Please leave your name tag on the table.
Y'all leave your name tags on the table. Wow.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you. But these are this week.
I'm so confused at what's going on. I don't know what's going on.
I couldn't keep up.
Me neither. So that was the only one we need to do. Well, I don't know.
You know me well, huh?
Want to try it on the back of this?
You want to carry a seat next month?
I was gonna say, Mr. Chair, you did a good job. You done it. I know you told me who was responsible for this one.
Talk to who?
Michael.
Oh, yeah.
We were going through our.
Well, we didn't have you guys will public hearing. Fast track. Sorry about that. Fast track.
Okay.